Hey everybody, this is Chad from Greyscalegorilla. So what are we doing today? Well, today we are going to talk about animating procedurally. So you can see I've got this little animation playing here that was created entirely with Signal, and no keyframes were harmed in the making of this animation. We're going to talk about scalable, editable, smart, reusable workflow, something that I try to do with all my product animations, as you will most likely encounter a product animation in your career. I'm going to try to help you make that a little bit easier. We also are going to talk a little bit about the rendering quality and the lighting and whatnot that's going on with this iPhone 6. And this iPhone 6 comes courtesy of Raphael Rao at silverwing-vfx.de. He made this awesome iPhone 6, and it's all set up for Octane, but I changed it to be friendly with physical, and I will include a download of the scene file so you guys can check it out. So yeah, let's jump right in and start talking about how we're going to animate procedurally and save you a ton of time and energy. Okay, here we are. So we've got our iPhone 6, and we're just going to hit play and watch it play down here, just like as we saw it before. So right away you kind of see that I've got three kind of pieces to this hierarchy, which I recommend setting up when you're doing these types of animations. I've got my main position hierarchical little helper here. It's a null with the display set to circle, and we'll walk you through all this in a second. And then my second one up, I've got my phone rotation, which is just kind of handling all of the major like phone rotational aspects. And then I've got a third one here, a third level to the hierarchy, which is just kind of this local phone rotation. And I've set it up as like a rectangle around the phone, so I kind of know where it is and which direction it's facing. It's a little easier that way. So you can kind of see I'm using Signal pretty heavily here. And if you haven't checked out Signal, I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite Greyscalegorilla plugins, and it's perfect for doing procedural animation. And I'm going to walk you through that in a minute. But first, let's quickly go through how to set up the hierarchy for the phone. So I'm going to go ahead and just dive into this hierarchy here. I'm going to strip out the actual phone itself, and I'm going to delete everything, basically. We're just going to start from scratch. I do have protect tags on all of the bits and pieces of the phone so that I don't accidentally select it. I'm going to go ahead and zero out the phone, and let's go ahead and zero out its rotation. And you can see that it's kind of setting. I'm going to jump into a perspective view so it's a little easier to see. And I've got my camera here, which is also protected so I don't accidentally bump it. And I'm just going to move my phone model up so that it's just sitting above the floor. Okay, and now I'm just going to start creating some nulls. I'm going to start creating my hierarchy here. So I'm going to grab a first null, and this is going to be my position hierarchical null. So I'm going to go ahead and make that a circle, and I'm going to have it face up, and I'm going to bring the radius up to like 25, maybe not that big, maybe like 15, something like that. I also like to color I like to color my helpers here and my nulls, just so that it's a little easier for me to see. So for my position, I'm going to make that hot pink. And just so it's really easy for me to visualize and see it, I'm going to make it a little bit smaller though. Okay, so there's null number one that we're going to use to move our phone all around. Now we're going to create another null. We're going to create this null, and this one is not going to be a circle. We're going to make it a hexagon, and we're going to also have it face upwards. I'm going to move it to about the center of the phone. About the center of the phone. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger than the phone. There we go. And I'm going to change its color to a nice yellow. So let's grab a yellow here. That's fine. All right, so we got our yellow helper. This is going to be our main rotation of our phone. We've got our position helper. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab another null, and this guy is going to be our local rotation. So I'm going to make him a rectangle, and we're going to have him not face up and down. We're going to have him face the camera. I'm going to move him up to the center of our phone, and I'm going to increase the radius of that guy about like that. And now I'm going to screw around with the aspect ratio, and then I'm going to bring the size back down to something a little bit more manageable here. Something, let's say, right about there. That feels pretty good. Okay, so let's grab that guy, and let's make him yellow as well. So I'm just going to grab him a yellow, because keep all our rotation helpers the same color. All right, so now we've got our null. Let's name them so that we're not going to hate ourselves in 6 months when we open this file. So we're going to call this position null, and we're going to call this main rotation, if I could spell, rotation null. And this last one is going to be local rotation null. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to throw our phone underneath the local rotation null. And then we're going to throw that null under this null. And then we're going to throw that null under that null. I hope that all made sense. Basically, I created a hierarchy. So I've got one hierarchy. This is for my position. This guy, this next one here will control all the rotation. And then I've got this other one here as my secondary, so I can do nice little twirls on it like that. It's kind of a gimbal rig. All right, now that that's all set, we can start to get into more of the fun stuff, which is animating with Signal. So the first thing that you need to know about Signal is that it's a tag, and you can use it to drive just about anything that you can imagine. For this, we're going to keep it pretty simple, and the first thing that we want to do is we want this phone to fly in and fly out. And I think 90 frames is a good amount of time. We're at 30 frames a second. 90 frames is a good amount of time for this thing to fly in and fly out. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to grab a signal tag and put it on my main position null. Now right off the bat, it doesn't know what to do with it. It's like, okay, well, I'm set up here, I'm waiting for you to tell me what to do, and then I'll start to work. So we need to tell it, what do I want to control with signal? Well, we want to control this position. So I'm going to grab that null and go into its coordinates. I'm going to grab the position, and really we want to only mess around with the Z position. So I'm just going to drag that Z right onto signal, and now it's connected, and now it knows that it's got to do something. So right now it's not doing anything because its start and end position point are 0 and 0. And its time is now set to 0 and 90. I'm not going to get into all the features. I highly recommend checking out all the videos and the documentation to get really into it. But for the sake of the video, trying to move along, I'm just going to kind of whiz through it a little bit. All right, so we got this going, and let's go ahead and figure out where we want it to start, where we want it to end. Well, we know we want it to kind of start back, and we want it to move forward, and then we want it to have to eventually go back into its original position. So you see what I'm doing here is I'm just going into the time frame here, and this is 0 to 1. So whatever the start and end frame, or the start and end value is, 0 is going to be the start, 1 is going to be the end, and I can always bring it back. So this is basically going from 0 to 1 and then holding a little bit and then going back to 0. So I'm making a little bit of an animation here just by doing this. So we want it to start. Where do we want it to start? Well, probably want it to start behind the camera, so back there. So I'm moving at -74 in my Z. And then when it gets to the middle of our animation, I think 0 is fine. And then when it comes back, it's going to move back. So right there, I'm just going to hit play, and you can kind of see what we've done here. We've created an animation where it comes in and flies out. Very, very cool. Very easy to do. And then, of course, you can adjust all of the eases and whatnot. We don't need it to ease in. In fact, we need it to ease into its rest position, but it can kind of fly in sort of fast. So I'm just going to tweak these keyframes down a little bit. And there we go. We have our nice little ease, and then he flies back in. I don't think I want him to come to a complete... He should never like come to a complete rest. So I'm just going to kind of let these keyframes drift a little bit. So now it's going to kind of create a little more of a bounce. So he doesn't ever come to a complete stop, which is kind of cool. I kind of like that. And of course, we would set it up where we'd have some hold. Right now it's looping at for 90. That's why it looks kind of like it's bouncing. But when we hold these first and last frames, it'll look fine. All right, so we've got that set up. And now what I want to do is I want to create another... I want to do another signal to move it away from the camera, because right now it's moving straight through our camera, and we don't want that. So what we need to do is we need to grab our null here. I'm just going to grab another signal, and then this time I'm going to grab the X position and drag it on there. Okay, I'm going to dive into that signal. So right now it's at 0 and 0. So at the beginning, I want it to start, let's say, a little off from center, so we're not penetrating our camera. And then I want it to, when it's over, I want it to go to the other side of the camera. So now it's going to go from one side to the next. But you can kind of see how it's doing like this like loop. It's kind of like doing like a little like sliding around along X here. I don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is I know that about halfway through this graph is going to be sitting at 0. So I'm just going to start to click, and I'm just holding down Control to draw extra points in Signal here. And I'm just going to kind of position this roughly where I want it. And that looks pretty good, but it's not quite sitting in center. So let's kind of grab these keyframes, and I'm just watching here to where my phone kind of hits the center line. And I think, okay, that's probably about right. So now I can hit play. And you can see he kind of comes in, and then he's going to go off to his respective positions. And in fact, I'm going to tweak these keyframes a little bit more so that he doesn't do this weird ease thing. All right, so there he comes in, and then when he flies out, he kind of comes into there. So let's look into our camera POV here and kind of watch everything. It's a little bit shifty there in terms of how it comes in. So I think I'm gonna like just ease these in a little bit to kind of give it a little bit more of a fluidity. That's better. And of course, you don't have to do this. You could actually just delete one of these keyframes and just create this little hold in the center that is a little bit more fluid. Yeah, that's a little better, a little more fluid. Okay, so now we've got the positions, let's say where we like them, and now we can start messing around with the rotations. So I'm going to grab my first level of rotation, which is this null right here, and I'm going to put a signal on that. And I'm going to make sure that we set up a nice little rotation on the spin of it. So let's just go ahead and open up this frame, grab this guy. All right, so let's grab the null here. We want to mess around with the rotation. Let's do the H. So let's grab this H and we'll drag it up into this signal. Okay, so we want it when he starts off, I want him to be -90, and then I want him to end at 90. Okay, so what that means is that he is going to be rotating along his. Let's actually bring that start frame down so we can actually see it go. So it's playing through that animation right now. So we've got 3 signals going, and they're all working really hard doing their thing. And right now, I don't like it because he shouldn't be spinning this entire time. Like, I don't like seeing him spin the entire time. I want him to spin and kind of get to a cool angle and then spin off again. So I like the spinning in, and I'm just hitting Control here to make another little keyframe, and we're gonna make him slow down right here, and I'm gonna make this ramp in a little bit faster and ramp out a little faster. Okay, so let's see. I'm just dragging this up to find that cool angle that I want. Okay, right there is pretty good. All right, so he'll come in. He hits that angle I like, and then he's going to rotate out. But I want him to rotate out a little bit sooner. So I'm just going to drag this guy in a little bit. Make it happen a little faster. Okay, great. Perfect. All right, that looks good. All right, now we're going to put a little tilt on him. We're going to put a little tilt on there. And I'm going to add another... I'm going to do another signal, because why not, right? You got it there. You might as well use as many as you like. All right, so I am going to now mess around with this P, and let's put that up there. And let's grab this, and let's make sure he starts off at like -20 and maybe goes to 20. And we'll let that play out, and we'll drag our first frame down so it has a value to climb to. Great. Okay, so now that's kind of cool, actually. I don't like him tilting forward so early, so I'm just going to hold that off a little bit. And let's go ahead and tweak this end point on that side. All right, cool. Great. All right, so now once you've kind of got something that you like there, that last level of rotation on this local level here, I'm just going to throw a signal on that one as well. And this one I'm going to, let's just get to a frame where we can see what's going on. And for that one, I think I'm going to do the H because I want to try to, I don't know, let's see what it looks like when we twirl it on that axis. All right, so let's do like maybe negative 180. It's probably not going to look great, but I just want you to see how easy this is to tweak. All right, so I said to go from negative 180 to 180. And let's go ahead and play it down, see what that does. But see how that gives it another level of local rotation that would be hard to do with one null or one pivot point. So I just wanted to show you how that works because I think it's a cool technique when you're doing these kinds of rigs that you want to have all that kind of control. Let's go to negative 90 to 90, something like that. It's probably too much, but you kind of get the idea. In fact, we could throw a little hold in here. And let's bring this guy back down to here. A little hold frame. Once you start messing around with this thing, it's really addictive. And you start figuring out all these cool things that you could do with it. So, okay, this is why I like using these types of rigs and I like using the signal for these types of animations is because, okay, let's say that we've got our animation where we like it and the client comes in and the client's like, yeah, that's great, but we wanted the entire thing to happen over 60 frames, not 90 frames. So, you know, if you're like me, you don't want to have to go in there and start scaling keyframes and tweaking all that sort of thing. So what's great about Signal is that I can literally come in here and start to grab all of these signal tags, and I can change its start and end frame. I can say, okay, you want it to happen in 60 frames? Let's see what that looks like. There, I just changed the end frame to 60, and now the whole thing is happening in 60 frames. And if the client's like, yeah, that's great, but we want it to start on frame 15 and end on frame 80. So we'll say, type our start frame at 15, our end frame at 80, and we'll go ahead and hit play down on that. Great, perfect. So right now, we have not set really any keyframes, but we've got a pretty dynamic animation going, and it's completely editable. Client can come in and say, oh, you know, it's great, but we want it shorter, faster, whatever. Or if they come in and they say, that's great, but we want it to be, you know, really frenetic or some sort of weird animation, I can grab this main rotation null here and add like maybe a noise modifier to one of these signal tags. So I'm just going to come down here and add noise to it. And I'm just going to play that down. What that does is adds a little bit of that kind of, you can see it gets this little weird wiggle right there. It's adding a little bit of noise to it. It's not really right for what I'm doing, but I mean, it's a great way to add a little bit of that randomness to it that you might need. Okay, so let's say that, you know, that's cool. We got our fly in and our fly out working. What happens? How else can we use, you know, Signal in this rig to do some interesting animations? Well, let's go back to the beginning. I'm just going to actually delete all of these signal tags, and we're going to go back to our 0 point. All right, and I'm going to rotate. I'm just going to grab all. I'm going to zero out everything, and go ahead and zero this guy out. Oh, actually, he's perfect. Okay. All right. So we've got our rig, and you know, I'm actually going to break out of the camera too. So if you know, the way Apple kind of does all of its animations, it's always like really, really languid and simple and not a lot of motion going on, but it's very interesting in the way that the way their camera angles and whatnot. Let me just hide this so we're not in the way. So one thing that I you know love about Signal is being able to like quickly set up stuff like that. So let's say that we want to create a really languid iPhone-esque, Apple-esque kind of move where maybe it's just like moving straight up into the air and maybe doing a little bit of a rotation, and then our camera is like, you know, dialed in real close up on it. So I could come in here and like set a keyframe and then set another keyframe, but I want everything editable because I don't know what I'm going to want to do later on. I might want to change it. I might want to create something completely different. And I might want to, like, you know, have maybe a client has an idea of how they want it to work out. So we've got to keep it editable at all times. So I'm going to drag my Y up here into this, and I'm going to set my my end at like 20. So let's go ahead and play this down. So I'm just making it going up in the air. That's all it's going to do. Okay, so we're just going to create a real simple move. I'm going to right-click inside of my little time window here, and I'm going to say Spline Presets Linear. So now it's going to be a linear move up, and that's all we want. And that looks pretty good. Okay, so that's one thing down. This next hierarchy part, this guy right here, I'm going to have him be rotating just in, let me zero him out first. Oops, that was the wrong one. I'm going to actually just be rotating him along, let's say this axis right here. So I'm going to add a signal tag to this guy, and we're going to go in here, we're going to drag up, I think that was the one I wanted, right? This one? Yeah. And put him up there. And I am going to make that guy start at like -30 and then go like 30 degrees. And we'll go ahead and bring our time to 0. Okay, so now there he goes. He's moving up, and he's basically just, let me just zoom out a little bit. Oops, I accidentally moved him. So there he goes. He's tilting forward. It's all good. Okay, again, I don't want it to ease in because all of these types of moves are linear. So I'm going to set these keyframes to linear. See, linear. And now we're going to have our guy, and he's kind of rotating slowly up, looking good. In fact, he's probably going too far. He's going too far forward. So I'm going to actually change that to 10 degrees. Perfect. Okay, great. All right, so now what? Now what do we want to do? I want to actually rotate the very last null, which is going to be my local rotation. Oops, I accidentally put it on the wrong one. Look at that. Ooh, I accidentally put it on the local rotation. So what happens if I just drag this up? Will that work? Let's find out. It does sort of work, only it's got the wrong axes. So I need to actually change that from this axis to this axis. So I am going to drag that guy up onto there and zero him out, and look at that. I got it to work. Look at that. You can drag stuff around, you can move it. It's totally editable. All right, so that's good. And I'm going to grab that local rotation guy, and I'm going to put his signal tag up, and I'm going to find out which one it is that I really want to move. I think it's going to be this dude. Nope, this dude right here. All right, so let's move him up into that signal tag. And this one I'm going to do -45 and 45. And we'll have him also go from 0 to 1. And we'll set up a linear style. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. That's pretty cool, but I think it's too much. Let's go down to like 20 degrees. See, and that's what's great. Like, I'm not having to actually do any sort of real keyframing here. I'm all doing it procedurally, and I think I need it to be, what is it, 90 maybe? So maybe it's like 80 degrees to like 110. Let's see what that looks like. Just a little bit of that rotation there. And let's try 70 to 120. Great, now we got a cool little move going here. But here's the thing, it's way, way too fast. So this is awesome. So this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna extend our timeline out to, like, let's say 150 frames. And I'm gonna click on this guy right here and hit Control A to make it fill the timeline. All right, so it's looking great. Like, I think it'll actually work for what we want, but it needs to happen over a longer period of time. So I'm just gonna grab all these signal tags, and I'm going to tell it to happen over 150 frames. So now we've got this really slow, languid move, and I am going to now set up a camera to kind of help me with that shot. And for this demo, I'm just going to tighten up here. I'm just going to create a camera. I'm going to jump into that camera, and we want it to be kind of a long lens. You want it to probably be about a 50 millimeter lens. And if we kind of let that play through, we can see we've got this like cool shot of our iPhone climbing through the frame, but it's still going way too fast for my taste. So I'm going to make this 500 frames long, and I'm going to fill it, and I'm going to go ahead and take all these signal tags and tell it to take 500 frames. So now we should be getting a really nice kind of slow move, and I'm just going to frame up on a cool part of it here. And really, I just want this beginning, and so I'm going to kind of move my camera down a little bit and try to find a cool angle. And I want it to kind of creep into my frame. So I'm just going to hit play. And right about here is where I want to concentrate my angle. So I'm just going to come and find my angle right at this moment and kind of frame up on these buttons a little bit. I don't really care where my camera is yet. I'm not going to worry about any of that. All right, so now let's play this. Cool. I like it. I feel like it could probably use a little bit of a faster rotation through the frame. Like maybe that button could swing through the frame a little bit, which is going to be on my local rotation. So I'm going to make sure that I'm going to go a little bit further with this. I'm going to go 20 degrees to 220 degrees and just see how that plays. So it should kind of like swing through the frame a little bit more. Yep, there it goes. Nice. Okay, so it's all about when you're doing these kind of shots, these macro shots, these product macros, you want that languid feeling. You want that like, you know, something that's just going to, it may feel like a really long shot, but in the edit, if you just use a piece of it, it's going to look great. And the way the light's going to play off of those buttons, it's going to look awesome. So when you're, well, let's just step out again so we can see what we've got going on. It's really, really simple. It doesn't really get much more simple than this. We got a simple hierarchy rig, and it's all happening right there. Very editable, very easy. And the best part about it is, like, if we had a new model come in, like a new phone, we could literally just bring it in, line it up to this hierarchy, and hit and link it back up and hit play, and it would be totally fine. All right, so let's talk a little bit about lighting. Let's do that next. Okay, so now comes the fun part where we're gonna try to get this this phone lit, looking good, looking hot, and ready to go. So I'm gonna stop right there on this frame because I think this is probably where I want to concentrate my look on. I need to go ahead and set the focal depth because I want to have some nice depth of field going on. And so I'm going to select the camera. And one of the things I love about cinema is this little focal distance clicker here. So with this thing, I can actually just like click around and like choose a new focal point for my camera. If my camera, let's say, is like way out here, the focus is like pulled way out, I can just click and it automatically snap to wherever I clicked. All right, so we've got that set up. I've also set up my physical settings in my camera to be about an f-stop of about 4, which will give me a nice depth of field on our phone here. We don't have any lighting in here yet, so one of the first things that I like to do is I try to get away with not having to get too crazy and setting up a ton of lights. In a situation like this, let's say we're under a deadline, one of the best things that you can do is use an HDR. And one of my favorite plugins is the HDRI Studio. So it's another Greyscalegorilla plugin, which I absolutely love. I'm going to dive into the settings of that guy. I encourage you, if you don't know it, to take a look and actually look at the collections and how to be a part of that. It's a great value. I'm going to turn off the floor. I'm going to go, this is my little floor gradient, which is actually more of a background gradient, really. So I'm going to create a nice little dark gradient happening behind my phone. And now I need to pick a map. Now I know that, you know, I want this thing to be pretty moody. So I'm going to go into the browser and I'm going to try to find something that matches. In fact, I think I might just pick a single light. In fact, I'm going to try this one right here, this little octagon. And I'm going to turn on the preview. so I can see where it is this light is going to show up. And I know that's not right because I don't want it to hit the front. I want it to hit more of like the side back, and that feels pretty good. Okay, cool. So that is probably where I want it. Now let's go ahead and check out my render settings. I'm using physical, I'm using GI, a little ambient occlusion. Got everything set pretty low right now while I'm working out the look of it. I don't like to, be working in a very high quality mode when I'm doing look dev. I also like to work in a smaller frame so that I can just quickly see what I'm doing and whether or not I'm digging it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit render on this. And that looks pretty good, except for it's way too blue. So I'm going to come into the HDR Studio Rig settings, and I'm going to bring the saturation down quite a bit and re-render that. And that looks pretty good, only now it's too bright. So I'm going to bring it down, the brightness a little bit. And maybe I went a bit too far. And let's bring the saturation down a little bit more. That feels pretty good. And I'm going to rotate it a little bit further away from camera. Oops. This way. And let's turn off our preview and render that. That's better. I'm just trying to get, anytime you're doing product lighting, it's all about the edges. It's all about the rim. It's all about molding the shape and letting the viewer kind of fill in the blanks. So the edges are super important. And I like the way this is looking. I think we're going to need some sort of light on this side to kind of kick off of the buttons over here. But I do think we could probably take this rotation a little bit further. In fact, I'm going to pull it all the way to the other side because I think it's going to loop around. Yep, perfect. Let's try that. Let's see what that does for us. I'm just trying to get that edge. I just want the hint of it because that's really what's the most interesting to me. Okay, so with that preview off, I'm going to go ahead and kind of jump out to a perspective view, and we're going to add a softbox from our light kit, the Greyscalegorilla light kit, studio light kit. So I'm going to drag him in, and let's zoom out a little bit. And one thing I like to do is I don't like seeing the baffling here, so I'm going to turn off the baffling because I don't really like it. It's kind of like it's just kind of in my way right now. Okay, so jumping back into my view here, and I'd like to have two views up at the same time. I know exactly where this light needs to be visible, and that's going to be right around this side of the object. And I'm also, let's just render this out as is right now, and you'll see it kind of in the shot a bit too heavily. So we don't want it to show up in our shot. So one thing that we want to do is grab that guy, and let's collapse him back down. And let's change, let's scroll down and turn off scene by camera. We'll render that again. All right, so that's good. He's not being seen by the camera anymore. But really what I want is a gradient, a little bit more of a gradient on this guy. And the gobo shape is fine. Square is good. I think I might go a little bit like taller and skinnier, like something like that. And I'm going to bring the imperfections down to like almost nothing. And I want this gradient to be a little bit more prominent. Oops, I accidentally added a point. So I'm going to darken that up and bring this hot spot right to the middle. And we'll go ahead and render that out. All right, good. All right, so that's looking a little bit better. Except I don't want my gradient going that way. I want to see what it looks like if I try to go the other way. That's interesting. I'm just kind of screwing around and seeing what I can get here. Don't really like that. I think maybe it was better the other way. I was trying to go for like a reverse gradient. Okay, that's working. All right, so I think I'm almost liking it. I'm going to, though, rotate it even more around this corner in hopes that I can get a little bit more edge lighting off of it. And then I'm going to bring the intensity down 50%. And a lot of this is just, me looking at it and saying, okay, that's getting to a good place, a place that I like it. And it's an experimental process. You're not going to get it on the first try. And that's really the key, is just knowing that, okay, I know I'm not going to nail it. I just want to, work it in there till the point where I dig it. All right, so let's go ahead and give this guy just a little bit of blue. Not a lot, just a little bit. A little bit will go a long way. And that's too much, and let's bring the saturation down. Again, I'm just working in very tiny increments of difference. And yes, it's grainy and it's noisy, but I can see through all of that because I've done this before. I know exactly how I want it to look. And I'm going to make this light a little bit skinnier. And now I'm going to rotate it back a little bit. And you'll see in a second why I'm doing that. I just want it to start to basically create this rim that I'm after. It's probably a little too far. Let's try that. All right, now we can start to see it. I think our depth of field might be a little bit high. So I'm going to go ahead and raise our f-stop to like a 7. And let's see what that does for us. I just want to create a nice little cut of light coming across that screen. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to bring this guy back into this position. And I'm going to make him a little bit wider. And now we should start to see, yep, a nice little cut line of our softbox cutting that shape off a little bit. That's exactly what I'm after. Okay, so now what I want is, I want my buttons, I like my buttons they're looking good on the left side, but I'm not seeing any definition on the other side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy my softbox, and I'm going to grab this guy, and I'm going to rotate him all the way around to where I know he's going to be hitting the buttons. And I'm going to actually bring him a little bit closer to my object. Let's see. Let's do that with our distance. And I want him to he's going to have to be pretty tiny if this is going to work. He's going to have to be right about there. And he's probably going to have to be about 50 units by maybe 300 units. And we're going to have to lift him up to get him onto those buttons. All right, so you can kind of see what I've got going now. And I think he's still going to need to come around a little bit more. All right, let's render that out and see what we get. Perfect. All right, so now we're getting a little bit more definition off of that edge. And even so, I think it could be a little bit skinnier, maybe like a 20. And don't be afraid to do some crazy otherworldly kind of sizes to get what you want, because it's all about getting the results that you're after. I still think maybe he could rotate a bit around this way, a little bit more. Let's see how that looks. Not too far. Sometimes you just go too far. And really what I'm watching is this edge of this button. That's all I'm watching right now. All right, that's looking pretty good. So I like it. I feel like still our depth of field is a bit high, so I'm going to dive it back into my camera and maybe put in I don't know, let's throw 9. See just how far it'll go. That looks pretty good. Okay, good. Now the color temperature of our background is completely wrong, but usually what I would do is just render this over black with an alpha and do the background in the comp. But for sake of speed, and I know this is going really long, so I'm going to go ahead and do that here. And I'm just going to dive into my background, in my HDRI Studio rig, dive into this floor gradient, and I'm just going to pick a color off my phone so that I know the temperature is the same. And I'm just going to darken it way up because it's way too bright. Let's do something like that. All right, so now we should at least have a matching color temperature going on, which we do, which looks good. So I'm going to pause it while I render this out high res so that you can kind of see it in all of its glory. All right, so there's our render. Turned out pretty cool. I think I would definitely probably do the background in the comp and not have it live here in cinema. But we've got some nice rim lighting. Got our screen light going on. Might want to dim that down a little bit. It's a little bit bright, but I think you get the idea. So I'm gonna get a little further into my techniques in terms of product rendering and just lighting in general in future tutorials. But I hope this was good for you guys in terms of figuring out nice, easy ways to animate things procedurally, so that you can then use them again and again, maybe even throw them into your preset browser so that you can open them up and not have to start from scratch every time. And I also hope you learned a little bit about my product rendering techniques, using very few lights to try to do a lot, and using the HDRI Studio Rig and the Light Kit and all these great tools at your disposal to create amazing imagery. So hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.